Well, good day wherever you may be. Welcome to this episode of Observations. We have Scott and Kirk here along with Craig. And Kirk, before we began, you said that you received a complaint. And it's a complaint that I was anticipating. It's one of the reasons I have gone out of my way to explain why we're doing it. But the complaint was that there's some folks that are tired of us exposing and condemning Paul and would like us to just return to the basics of the covenant and God's overall message to us. Is that valid?
And anything, it's just people, you swim around with Paul, and I think everybody gets sick of it, and I appreciate
I appreciate
that. But my response to something like that, at least in my own mind, I didn't really respond to the person because everyone's entitled to opinion, and theirs is as good as mine. But a lot of people, when it comes to Paul, he's got to be in Christianity. It's got to be. My response would be, it's got to be the most poisonous disease has ever hit mankind.
Yes.
And then when you encompass that with, or you include that with its enabling of Islam, it's a deadly duo. And then if you really, extrapolate that into what we as a Western world who are primarily Christian become a social secular humanist.
Right. It's framed the entire politic of the West is shaped on Christianity. Yeah, particularly on Paul's 13th chapter of his letter to the Romans. It's based on submitting to one's government. And well, for example, we just passed through Memorial Day here in America, and as I would drive by all of the mega churches that were here in the greater Cincinnati area, they all had anywhere from scores to hundreds of flags.
Yeah.
And it was obvious that from the perspective of these churches, there was no difference between their religion and their politics. That
so
being
church and state,
or absolutely, yeah. So you have the symbolism intertwined of the Christian cross and the American flag, and there's absolutely no separation between them from their perspective. So yeah, it is more than just the religion that we have all walked away from of Christianity. It is also societal. I mean, there are very few Americans that don't do something relative to Christmas, Halloween, and Easter, even if they're not Christian.
Yeah.
And it's pervasive. You look at the military and how many times we hear "God bless our troops," or how you watch a sporting event and there's "God bless America" in the midst of the sporting event, or a flyby of warplanes. Just a funny thing. When they fly the B-2 bombers, at the Batwing bomber, over the major sporting events. Do you know how many we have in the active fleet of B-2 bombers?
No, I'm not sure. Wouldn't know.
20.
20.
We spent, $100 billion or more in research. We have 20 of them.
They are one expensive plane.
Oh, my God. I was out at an aircraft museum the other day, and you just look at the stupidity of the whole thing and how we continue to develop these. They spend god-awful amounts of money developing this technology for these weapon systems, like the F-22 is an example. It was a stealth fighter. And, we spent well over $100 billion developing it. And I don't think we even made 100 of these airplanes. And it was absurd to begin with. I mean, first, it didn't have an enemy that it could oppose. But the thing only carries, its entire weapons load is 6 tiny little rockets, the size that, if you took a standard cup of coffee, that's how much ballistics capability payload they carried in each one of these 6 missiles. I guess you could bring down an airplane with them, but you aren't doing anything else with them. Why have it?
Well, how has it helped any war
Oh, of course not. Yeah.
The war that we've been in so far.
You look at everything that we've done since World War II, and you say, what of these weapon systems did anything of any value whatsoever? And then you can't even excuse them for World War II because of the stupidity of the way that war was waged, the great sacrifice of life, leaving the world worse off than we found it. It's just. I was outside of Dayton because this is the White Brothers country. And of course, the headquarters of the U.S. Air Force is at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is in Dayton, Ohio. And as I was there, the first exhibit was the Wright Brothers, but it wasn't the Wright Flyer. The Wright Flyer, of course, is in the Smithsonian on the Mall in Washington, D.C. No, it wasn't the Wright Flyer. It was the Wright second airplane. Mm-hmm. The second airplane was built for the U.S. Army.
Really?
And they were training uniformed U.S. Army personnel. And within 5 years of the time that they developed the first airplane, it was completely the focus was almost entirely on weaponizing it, and there was already guns being fired from airplanes within 5 years. Within 10 years. They were most airplane development was focused on military warplanes, and this had an entire wing of the museum just for the first 10 years of military development of aircraft after the first airplane was flown.
Well, there was no Hughes aircraft without the military. I mean, everything he did was, even when he turned down their offers, he was waiting for the price to go up.
Wasn't for the military.
They needed him. So.
Yeah, wasn't for the military. You never heard of the Wright brothers.
No.
No. So, yeah, it was pretty sad. All right. So let me explain why we're doing what we're doing, and I'm gonna do so by first asking you a question.
Okay.
Is prophecy of interest to most people?
Absolutely it is.
Okay. My understanding is that there's three reasons that prophecy exists. The primary reason is to demonstrate that the inspiration for the words that we read in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms are from Yahowah, because Yahowah is the only person, only individual who can consistently get precisely prescribed, predicted prophecies right 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And so that's the primary purpose of prophecy. The secondary purpose of prophecy is that they give God an opportunity to teach. Mm-hmm. So every prophecy includes information that makes us wiser, so that we understand more of who God is and what he's offering. And the third is so that we can be prepared, so that we can avoid the calamity that's going to ensnare many. Those are the three reasons for prophecy, right?
That's very good, yeah.
Okay. All right. If that being the case, and feel free to argue. I mean, I'm stating my conclusion based on
that. I mean,
okay. Right. All right. The next point I would ask you, a question I would ask you is, what is the single most prolific subject of prophecy in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms? What thing does God talk about the most?
Babylon.
No.
No? Okay.
No, not the single most. No. He predicts how Babylon will morph into Persia, and Persia will morph into Greece, and Greece will morph into the Empire of Rome, Imperial Rome, and how Imperial Rome will morph into the Roman Catholic Church, and how each of these beasts is devastating to humankind. And he does speak a lot about the rise and fall of Babylon, and ultimately the influence of Babylon on society. So there's a fair amount of that. And there's a fair amount of, I would have thought that most people would pick as the single most prolific subject would be predictions of Yahusha.
Yeah.
And that's got to be close, but the messianic prophecies really don't exist in the sense that God doesn't use the term Messiah as a title.
No.
And so there's really, there are lots of predictions by way of subtle insights and dress rehearsals and perspectives on what's going to happen and how Yahusha is going to fulfill these prophecies. he's not mentioned by name. I mean, there's a lot of references to Yahusha in the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms, but they're to Yahusha ben Nun, not Yahusha ben Yahowah.
Right.
And so, there's a fair amount of it, but it's not number one.
That would be my second guess is rescue plan.
Okay, and then in third, you would think that number three would be the reconciliation of Yisrael and or the final battles, the Magog War, for example, Armageddon, that sort of thing. And Armageddon, there's the Magog War gets a fair amount of ink in one book, and in Ezekiel, it's a fairly dominant subject, but not through the rest of it. I mean, it's mentioned in the other prophets, but not heavily.
Right.
So that's not it. And of course, Israel, God restoring his relationship with Israel is covered in a number of places. Covered in Hosea, it's covered in Yirmiyah, but it's even a small part of the books where it's mentioned. So that's not it. So, I'm going to tell you what the single most prevalent subject is.
Put me out of my misery, okay?
Pauline Christianity.
Well,
the rise of
I can almost prove that now because of what we've covered the last year.
Yeah, we're just scratching the surface of it. The reason we got into talking about Paul again wasn't because I wanted to. I mean, listen, after I did the rewrite of Questioning Paul and took Questioning Paul from a 600-page book to 1,200 pages, after we completed the rewrite of Questioning Paul, I mean, I had my fill.
Mm-hmm.
That was the last place I wanted to go back.
I hear you.
But I grew weary of the commercials and general attitude at Genesis Communication and Network. Now we're using their facilities to record and to broadcast this program, and I'm appreciative of that. And the general manager, John Hartman, is a really fine guy, and they have one of the nicest guys I've ever come to know as their stellar employee. Scott, who was with us here, and
meet that guy.
Yeah, and meet that guy. But it got a little wearisome, and I wanted to go back to writing. And I typically, when I write, I follow a lead. Somebody will send me something, and like Questioning Paul, our good friend David from the land down under in New Zealand, sent me an email, said that he'd overheard pastors in New Zealand explaining that the Torah had been nullified, and that Paul claims that it had been nullified in Galatians, and that therefore it has no value whatsoever. And studying what he sent me led to the book. Well, this particular book, Observations for a Time, which is what this program is named after, is a derivative of an email as well. Mm-hmm. A different individual, another individual that many of us know and have come to love, William the Elevator Man. William down in Florida, who works on elevators, asked me who the whore was that was being discussed in Proverbs 6. Simple enough question. And so I went to Proverbs 6 and started translating. Now, I want to be careful here because, I get emails every day where somebody says, could you look and do this passage for me? And I don't do it 90% of the time, because once I start on a project like this, it just, it sucks me in, and I just spend all my time pursuing it. And, and if I jump around to different things and don't follow those words where they lead, then typically I get nothing done that has any value. We're 7 chapters into, I'm in the 8th chapter, about halfway through the 8th chapter of Observations for Our Time. And I did not know we were going to be talking about Paul again.
No.
But the 7th and 8th proverb are all Paul.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're talking about. And then as we understood then from Proverbs 6 and Proverbs 7 that it was specifically Paul that was being condemned, there was this direct association in Proverbs 7 between Paul and a whore.
Yeah, right outside the door.
Right. So I wanted to figure out what the connection was between Paul and the whore. Because Proverbs 7, that's the basis of it, is the direct relationship between Paul and the whore. And so I spent some time trying to track down what Yahowah has to say about the whore. Now, instinctively, I knew that the whore was the whore of Babylon. So if you're going to track down the whore, the book that systematically, from the opening chapter, begins by condemning religion, and then introduces the concept of the whore, and then tells us about Satan, associates Satan with the whore, and then Satan with Babylon, is the book of Yahowah, Isaiah. You just read it. Chapters 1 through 14 systematically take you from religion and the whore are one and the same. That the whore and Satan are one and the same, and that Babylon and Satan are coterminous. And so you put all those things together, so now you've got this ability to explain what it is that God opposes. Now, so the second answer to the question is, it's the most prolific topic and the single most interesting subject for most people. So prophecy is the single most interesting subject. It's one I happen to like the most because it proves conclusively that Yahowah authored the text that we're reading and that we can trust him. So those are, and he teaches throughout them. So it's a win-win. Yeah, it's a win-win all the way through. So I really like it from that point of view, and I've used it in Yahowah to introduce people to the reality that God can be known, that he proves his existence, that he can be known, and that what he has to say is really fascinating. And so I have a natural proclivity to go where prophecy leads, and I think the single most prevalent prophecies are on Pauline Christianity. Now, the next question I would ask you is that in Yahowah's Torah, which means teaching and guidance, is it all about establishing a list of things do not do? Is it all about establishing a list of things, these things you should do? Is it all about telling us what we need to know to have a relationship with God? Or is it also all to do with if you do these things, bad things are going to happen? Is the answer one of those or all of those?
Well, it's all of them. There's more emphasis on the latter two, I think. I don't think he says don't do this because it's not healthy for you, like kosher things. So what? I mean, that's you know better, and that's easy. He's not saying you can never eat a piece of pork sandwich or something like that. And the do's, he doesn't expect us to be perfect, i.e. goad. Therefore, that's not overwhelming his day.
No, in fact, the most important, the most common do's are listen to what I have to say and closely examine and consider what it is that I have written on your behalf. So that's the most common do, is to shed your ignorance and to develop a basis of knowledge so that you can understand and therefore make responsible, reasonable decisions. God spends about as much time, if not more, talking about the things that trip us up as he does the things that are beneficial for us. And the more you understand the things that trip you up, the better you understand who God is and what he's offering. For example, if we were to mock the U.S. military and its wasteful spending on all manner of deadly contraptions, its propensity to abuse women sexually and not hold the perpetrators accountable, its a deliberate use of deception regarding its wars, and the fact that it has never done what it claims to do, which is to defend American freedom. If we were to mock, if we were to mock the military and expose, we'd be 100 people among several hundred million that recognize that the U.S. military is counterproductive and a complete and utter waste of money and a fraud. You might say, well, why are we focused on that as opposed to God wanting us to trust and rely on him. And I'm telling you, they're the opposite sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. You can't rely on Yahowah until you're willing to stop relying on your military. If you think your military is providing your freedom, then God isn't.
Yeah, that's true.
And you need to compare how the military goes about alleging to provide freedom when it actually withholds freedom. How it, Yahowah enriches you while providing your freedom. And it's genuine freedom that costs you nothing, that liberates you in every possible way, and you can rely on what he's offering, or your military is a complete fraud in this regard and delivers nothing of value while robbing and raping its citizenry. And so the comparison between the two is essential for us to understand. And I would ask you, the next point is, what is the first requirement for participating in the covenant?
It's always to walk away from those very things.
Correct. Now, if God just said, I want you to walk away from your country, from Babylon, from the confusion and corruption of religion, if God said, I want you to do that, and you know that's the first requirement of the covenant, and you spend absolutely no time talking about what it is about government and religion that are poisonous and destructive and deadly,
then you missed the point.
Then aren't you taking what God said on faith?
Absolutely, because you're supposed to know what you walked away from.
Correct. And so would there be any reason for Yahowah to go through and list the 12 reasons that we ought not pledge any allegiance to or align ourselves with a government? And in Shamuel, we went through this whole list of the 12 points that God made against government. Would God have revealed that if he didn't want us to know why it is that he wants us to walk away from these things?
Yeah, in retrospect, if I'd read that 20 years ago, my life would have been a lot better.
Correct. So it is essential. And if God has a requirement that says you have to walk away from your government, from Babel, from the confusion, and Babel is religion, from religion and politics, from government, you have to walk away from those things before you can engage in a relationship with him.
Right.
If we don't explain what it is about those things that is contrary to the covenant, contrary to what God is offering, why those things are counterproductive, and what God is offering instead is beneficial, then all we're doing is the same thing that religion does. Mm-hmm. We're telling people to believe based on faith. God doesn't work that way.
No, not at all.
Now, the next thing I would say is this. How much time do you, Scott, and I have to learn about Yahowah and to enjoy the covenant relationship with him?
Forever.
All right. How much time do the people who are still influenced by, still sickened by, still harmed by religion and politics have to resolve that problem, to come to recognize that these things are counterproductive, to distance themselves from them and be open to what God has to say? How much time do they have?
They have anywhere from 1 day to 16 and a half years, I would think.
That is correct. That is correct. How many people are there that are prepared and willing to tell them the truth about the things that have beguiled them, and the truth about the one who would liberate them and enrich them? How many people out there who are willing and able to do that? Prepared, willing, and able.
I think it's probably difficult to find more than 1 to 2,000.
Yeah, I think in terms of willing and able and engaged in doing it, my guess is you could count them on 2 or 3 hands.
Yeah.
Maybe 20, maybe 30. Yeah, maybe let's exaggerate. Let's say there's 50 people out there.
Okay.
So what if those 50 people, instead of trying to reach out to those who are not part of the covenant, decide, all we're going to do is we're going to nurture and and try to enrich the lives of those in the covenant. And we're just going to spend very little time exposing and condemning the plague of death. And we're just going to, help those in the covenant enjoy the relationship with Yahowah more. That's a lovely thing to do.
I can do a lot of that on my own without you.
Yeah. Now, I want to tell you about one other thing here. When we talked about prophecy, I told you there was 3 reasons for prophecy.
Right.
If we ignore it, then we aren't providing the teaching that's associated with it, which does enrich the lives of those of us in the covenant. There are levels of confidence. The level of confidence that I had that I was reading something profound when I was able to equate the 6 24-hour days of creation with 14 or 15 billion years, based upon the cosmic radiation background from the Big Bang, and then go through each of the subsequent events as God reveals them, the creation account, and realize that 6 24-hour days from the point of view of someone at creation, and 14 to 15 billion years looking back on from our perspective in time are exactly the same amount of time. My confidence that I was reading something profoundly important was extraordinarily high. Mm-hmm. Now, having spent 10 years analyzing and translating prophecies and coming to know what God said a millionfold over what I knew at that time, my confidence is far greater than it was at that time. So, even though there had been no way to rationally convince me that what I was reading was anything other than inspired by the creator of the universe back 10 years ago, after, you come upon that realization. We've come across 1,000 confirmations, every bit as profound as that, since that time. And so one of the real tremendous uplifting benefits of being part of the covenant family is growing in one's conviction, growing in one's understanding, growing in one's absolute knowledge of the truth.
Yeah.
What better way to do that than prophecy? What better way to do that than prophecy?
Right. No, I'm totally on the same page, but I do understand that, I know if I threw down a straight stick with a whole bunch of crooked sticks, I should be able to figure out which one is the straight stick. But, the influences of, if we don't do this, rather, the influences of peer pressure and all that, nobody's going to look for it.
Yeah.
The
the single most devastating individual in all of human history is Paul. Yeah, Paul, the author of the Christian religion.
Yeah.
No one has influenced more people negatively than that one man. God has a lot to say about him, and he calls him the plague of death. He despises him. Mm-hmm. And so if it's appropriate for God to spend this much time talking about it, don't you think it may be wise for us?
Yeah.
And when God said in Shabbat, what I'm revealing here is going to be, I want you to write it down because it's going to become useful in the last days. Mm-hmm. Who was he speaking of if he wasn't speaking of us? Right?
He's absolutely talking to us.
Yeah.
And Shabbat's name is embrace this. He's
right.
He really wants you to get
exactly.
This.
Yeah. And here I've been encouraged to write a book called Questioning Him, and the next line is, why don't they question him?
Question him. Profound.
Yeah. So, and when we read the prophecies that were in Proverbs 6 and 7, they were just like the prophecies in Shabbat.
Yeah.
It's not just that they mentioned Shaul by name, which is profound, because there are not a lot of Yehudim, Israelites, walking around with the name Shaul because of the negatives associated with King Shaul, and the negatives associated with the name itself, which means to question him, and the negatives associated with the fact that Shaul and Sheol are written exactly the same way in Hebrew, and Sheol speaks of separation from God.
Yeah.
The place that Christians know as hell. Right. Okay, I'm going to give you two other reasons that I'm covering the material regarding Paul and Christianity.
Okay.
The next reason is that, for example, right now I'm translating passages in books that I had really paid very little attention to at the past. I mean, if you read Yada Yah, Intro to God, Questioning Paul, if you read those books, one of the things you'd find is that you can count the number of passages that I translated from Chronicles and Kings. You could count them, or even Samuel, Chronicles and Kings. You could count them on two hands, maybe. Well, so far, and you could say I think it was only one proverb that I actually translated quoted from. So one proverb.
A real big.
Yeah, and nothing really. I don't think anything from nothing of consequence from Samuel, Chronicles and Kings.
Yeah. And
that's where I'm finding myself now is other than these 3 chapters that I've begun for Yahowah, Isaiah. No, I mean, my goal is to get through Isaiah 14 in time, but. So right now I'm in Chronicles, and son of a gun, not every time, that's an exaggeration, but with each discussion that occurs, and I'm learning just a ton because these are discussions between Yahowah and Dode, and the circumstances surrounding the creation of the city of Dode, the city of David, and then the threshing floor upon which the temple was to be built, and then the accumulation of materials for it, and the transition between Dode and Solomon, and Dode's proclivity to do some pretty dumb stuff. And it's just fascinating. In the midst of it, there's all of these profound insights that come from the participants in these discussions, and one of the things that just permeates out of it all is that God's got one family, one covenant, one household, one way. There is no way to know him if you don't know his name. There's no way to approach him unless you engage in his covenant. There isn't a renewed covenant. There isn't a new covenant. There's nothing in his Torah that he has annulled or changed. And so with every discussion, there's a repudiation of the most popular religion in the world. And with every discussion, here the lessons are coming from God's engagement with 2 rascals. I mean, Dode and Solomon were bad boys.
Oh, yeah.
But they were also extraordinary in their intellect and understanding of who Yahowah was. Now, the difference is that Dode had a reliant curiosity. Dode's curiosity was, I want to know what God said and understand what God said, and then write songs to help others come to share the same insights into what God is saying that I have learned. So
yeah,
Dode's
greatest value right there.
Yeah, and that's what Dode did before he ultimately became a little too full of himself.
Yeah.
And so we reach a point with Dode where God's not even speaking directly to him. He's all communications with Dode go through a prophet named Gad.
Right.
And Dode's not even allowed to build the home. By the way, it's not called a temple; it's called a home. And so, but these conversations are just extraordinary between the various parties, and they're constantly reinforcing the fact that God has a singular plan, and that he works through flawed individuals to share that plan, and that he is never going to relinquish on that plan. Now, what you find about Solomon, what's interesting, is Solomon writes about his own experience. Solomon's intellect was every bit as great as Dode's, but his focus was different. Dode's focus was on Yahowah's testimony, understanding it, and sharing it. Solomon's wisdom was invested on sharing Solomon's experiences. In other words, Solomon was self-indulgent. every bit as smart as his father. But God still had a marvelous relationship with Solomon, just as he did with Dode. And in listening to what is being said, everything that we have come to know about the covenant, about Yahowah, about God's family, what he is offering us, what he wants us to reject, what he wants us to accept, it's just all reinforced all the way through. And so the repudiation of the world's most influential religion and most popular religion exists all the way through that material. So that's the fifth reason. I'm going to give you a sixth. I can't help myself. I was an ordained ruling elder in the Presbyterian Church. I was a trained evangelist. I led Bible studies. I was the keynote speaker at the Presbyterian's Church's National Assembly. I was a Christian up to my eyeballs, and I have subsequently learned that the religion that I once believed is a complete and utter fraud, that it is worse than being useless. It's a plague of death. And when I think of all of the frauds, hey, look at Baylor University now, the largest Baptist school in the country, and the hypocrisy that oozes out of that place, and the hypocrisy that just emanates from all Christians. It makes me sick. It makes me angry. And it makes me angry that you've got a 1.2 billion Roman Catholics in the world today, and how they're just swooning over this piece of crap, Bergoglio, that's their pope. It makes me angry. It makes God angry. And you know, one of the things that I have learned from Yahowah, and it puts me in a very different position than the rest of the world, is that our problem isn't that we hate, so we don't hate enough.
And we don't hate the right people.
Right. If you don't hate institutions that are deceptive and debilitating and counterproductive and that are inspiring horrid behaviors and horrid conclusions in terms of influence on people's lives, if you don't hate that kind of thing, there's something wrong with you. Then you're not moral. Then you're not reasonable. Then you're not being just. You're not being compassionate. And so God hates them, and I hate them. And you know, there are times, in fact, God is really clear about this. The people that he likes stand up against what he disapproves of. That's one of the things about Dode that was so decad good, is that Dode says, you know, I hate my enemies. You know, this is what they say, and this is why I despise them. Not a lot of people that are willing to bow their back and stand up against evil. And so if we don't, who will?
Yeah.
You know, I just received a letter from a fellow down in South America saying, what's your take on the political scene in America right now? And my response was, I think it's the 4 worst candidates that America's ever fielded. And while I disagree with almost everything Trump says and wants to do, you know, he's the least objectionable of the 4. Now, I'm not voting for him. I'm not going to endorse him. I disagree with almost everything he says and almost everything he wants to accomplish. I'm in opposition to. I know for a fact he is wrong. And yet he's the best of a bad lot. That's how bad the situation is.
What does that say about him?
Right. I was reading an article just before the show began. It was on France, a holiday, telling the world that Israel must accept a 2-state solution. And you read that and you say, well, first of all, why would you equate 2-state and solution?
Yeah.
When the Muslims were given Gaza, what did that solve?
Absolutely nothing. It made it worse.
Of course.
It's horrible.
You know, Syria was divided between the city-state of Damascus, the Assad regime, and the Islamic State. How did that solve anything?
It's done nothing.
Right. You know, we have a three-state solution now in Iraq. You have Iran West in Baghdad and the Shia areas. You've got the Islamic State and Mosul and elsewhere, and then you've got the Kurds. Now you've got a three-state solution. Why isn't anybody touting the three-state solution in Iraq, or the two-state solution in Syria, or the 100-state solution in Libya? You know, Libya's gone from a military dictatorship under Gaddafi to tribal jihadists. Right. So you got a 100-state solution there. How'd that work? You know, they finally gave the animists and Christians in the south of Sudan their own state. Two-state solution, man. You got the Muslims in the north. You've got, of course, the African Muslims in the east of Sudan. They're still getting pummeled to some degree. But in the south, the animists and Christians, they've been ruthless barbarians. How did that two-state solution work there? And if by giving the Muslims Gaza created a perpetual state of war with Israel, why would giving the West Bank, which would isolate Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and the swath of land where 70% of the Israelites live, so that they're going to live in a zone that's 10 miles wide? How is that going to do anything but be instantly suicidal?
Well, I would say to you, who is so arrogant that they think that they have the right to tell somebody what to give up for their own country?
Who gave?
Who are you that you?
Who gave Israel?
I was in Israel, living in Israel. I mean, well, who the hell are you?
Yeah, who gave Israel to the Israelites?
George Bush. I'm sorry, God gave Israel to Israelites.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about the...
So what man has the right to take what God gave?
Yeah, nobody.
Okay, then you look at the other side. You've got people calling themselves Palestinians. Is there anything such thing as a Palestinian?
No, that's absurd.
When did the last Palestinian live?
3,200 years ago, maybe.
Well, certainly 2,600.
26, yeah. I mean, you see them in
2,600.
time, and then they all get wiped out.
Yeah. Dod's time, they were around in Dod's time, and they were just a militaristic, uncouth, vicious group of people.
Yeah.
Probably Phoenicians, in all likelihood, just like the Carthaginians were Phoenicians.
Yeah, Carthaginians.
And in all likelihood, the Philistines were a particularly uncouth, uncivil version of Phoenicians. The difference were the Phoenicians fairly sophisticated society, very literate, and the Carthaginians continued with the Phoenician alphabet and the Phoenician language, and continued the Phoenician prowess in terms of navy and trade. But the so-called Philistines, they were only good at one thing.
Yeah, just kill.
Yeah, making weapons and harassing people.
Right.
And so they are the ultimate enemy of Israel, and therefore an enemy of God. And the Assyrians and the Babylonians, in their pursuit of the Egyptians, they could care less about the Philistines. But they wiped out the last of them 600 BCE. There hasn't been a single one for 2,500 years, not one. And even beyond that, there is no legacy of them. There is nothing known about them. No one knows what they called themselves. No one knows what language they spoke. There isn't a single.
Know that. Why?
Yeah. Right. So there isn't the only reason we even know about a peoples that were called, not who called themselves, who were called the Philistines, which means terrorists who invade. The only reason we know anything about them, the only reason the name is known, is because of what is said about them in these books that we're now considering, and particularly in Shemuel. That is why we know about them. If it wasn't for Yahweh's prophets speaking of them, nothing would be known about them. So for somebody to call themselves that, the name is derived entirely from a document that says you're foreign invaders who were terrorists. And the last of that group of people, in terms of being the actual people themselves, the actual nation themselves, was destroyed 2,500 years ago. And what it represents in terms of a name is the antithesis of someone who deserves the land. It means foreign invader who uses terror.
And the United States embraces that.
Correct.
And promotes that. And
so does France, so does Great Britain, so does Germany. And collectively, God's very clear about this prophecy.
What do you think God's going to be on? Come on,
God predicts that Israel will ultimately be forced, either in 2024, 5, 6, 7, forced to give up the West Bank, because the world will all turn against Israel. And they'll be forced to give up the West Bank, and it's going to lead almost immediately to World War III. To the Magog War. And
that's why we study prophecy.
That's why we study prophecy. It's important not only to know what's going to happen so that you can be prepared and forearmed and forewarned, but it's the ultimate tool to deploy in garnering somebody's attention. The moment somebody begins to say, what in the world are we talking about, a two-state solution? Why are we rewarding terrorists? Why are we taking the only country that's worth a damn in the entire region and trying to carve it up? Why are we against the only good country in the midst of these horrible actors? And when somebody begins to question, if there's somebody that's there to say, listen, 3,000 years ago, 2,700 years ago, this is what was written about the days that we're witnessing right now, about the news that we're reading in our newspaper. This is what was said about it. Those people who have begun to question their religion and their government and their military are going to find that there is something they can grasp hold of that is true, that is reliable, that answers their questions. And if we don't share that, who will? And if we don't share that, then what hope is there for others to join the covenant? Do you think God took all this time to share all this with us so we could just keep it to ourselves?
Of course not.
Are we going to be like the right-wing wackos in America that says this is my country, the rest of you can't have it? You stay out, all of you people with different skin colors or that speak a different language. This is my country. You just stay out of here. Are we going to be that in terms of the covenant? This is our covenant, and we don't want you because, I don't want to share. No. Listen, there isn't anybody that's part of the covenant that any one of us is going to say, listen, there's every aspect of that individual resonates with me. They are the perfect companion. We all have our glitches. We all have our foibles. But I'll tell you what, each of us that have joined in the covenant, we all bring something to it that makes life in it richer.
Yeah.
We are all hugely benefit. You look at Roy and the contributions that he brought to us scientifically. You look at Richard and the amount of just understanding that he brought when he was explaining how he and Christy endured so much discomfort, difficulty as a result of people acting badly, and understanding what it's like to be homeless. I had no concept of that. To hear him tell that story, it profoundly changed the way that I view life and the world. Rich by that. You look at someone like Larry who rubs a lot of people wrong, sometimes because of his language or sometimes because he's just uncompromised. He's in your face, yeah. But I'm just translating a passage here about this transition from Dode to Solomon. And Dode said, he ain't ready yet. He's too gentle. He's too mild.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, these things make him ill-prepared. And I wrote a whole paragraph on it. It says, it's always been my impression, looking at what God likes and what he doesn't like, is that he wants to have relationships with men who are men and women who are women.
Yeah.
He made us different for a reason. He loves the difference. He wants to celebrate the difference. And the last thing he wants is a mealy-mouthed man. If you're a man, stand up. Have some backbone. He wants people that are engaged, that are willing to go out and accomplish something, committed to doing it, not afraid of the consequence of being reviled for telling the truth. And so, Larry's the poster child for that. I like that. God likes strong personalities. And Dode had a very strong personality. And so we're all richer by it. I mean, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't love Dode from Down Under, for example, or Frank, or Don, who has created his site.
Yeah, these are good guys.
Right. Or Jackie, who's committed so much time to editing this book and those that she communicates with. It's Lisa, who's had so many marvelous things to add to our company recently. Jason, who calls into this, not this program, but the evening program quite often.
Yes.
We're enriched by the number of people who participate, and the more who participate, the more exciting, the more fun eternity is going to be.
Right.
So, since the first condition of the covenant is to walk away from your country and from the babble of religion, if we don't take the time to explain why God is opposed to these things and why he is not willing to engage in a discussion or a relationship with you while you cling to these things, then what we're doing is we're leaving the world without hope. Now, I'm not saying that because we're special. We're not.
No.
But there's always been very few who are committed to the truth, who know the truth, who are willing to share the truth. And right now, that is still the case. There are very few. And if we don't do it, it's not going to get done. Now, it's not like we're making a sacrifice to do this. It's not like saying, well, there's no one else to go, so, we'll trudge on. No, it happens to be the most enjoyable job in the world.
I find it great fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I never thought it'd be this much fun.
Yeah. You went and did a whole study on how Woodrow Wilson deliberately caused what was called the Spanish flu.
Yes, sir.
Bred it, gave it to Americans in Kansas, sent them off to the world, and did it knowingly and deliberately.
Right.
That's pretty disgusting stuff.
That's incredibly disgusting stuff.
Yeah. However, once you were done with it, you, like me, like Larry, we're all patriots. And once you've done it and you find added fact, convicting fact, that demonstrates why God is opposed to all governments, my guess is you came out of it reassured, stronger, not just as... all the stuff that goes around about these guys are great and this is our system and all that, it just puts nails in all the coffins for me. I'm absolutely justified in telling you they're incredibly evil and immoral. Don't follow them. Don't listen to them. Right. Yeah, they are.
It's not even close.
There's a reason that God is opposed to them.
Yeah. I never thought Christianity it was as bad as I've discovered. I mean, we're going back 10 years.
Right.
But these 10 years ago, I would say there's got to be there's a thread of it. I never thought it was as all great as all one group anyway. But I never thought it was this evil.
It would never have dawned on me to realize the stupidity of believing that God died for my sins, that man killed God, and how just utterly stupid that was. Would never have dawned on me prior. It would never have dawned on me that there could not have been a bodily resurrection. It would never have dawned on me that every aspect of Christianity was Babylonian and pagan.
Yeah.
I would never have thought for a moment that the Trinity was pagan, that Sunday worship was pagan, that Christmas and Easter were pagan. They were not just pagan, they're Babylonian.
Well, yeah, I knew some of those. Yeah, I knew some of those, boy.
Yeah, but I mean, after a while, you know.
To the degree, I thought somehow you could reconcile all those.
Oh, yeah. I mean, did I know that there was a history of Ishtar and Easter? Yeah, but I said, it's just coincidence.
Yeah.
Never would have dealt with the fact that they're an absolute disgusting abomination. And more important than that, I would never have dealt with the absurdity of Paul's claim, where he claims that the God who authored the Torah, prophets, and Psalms was incapable of saving anyone, that he had admitted that what he wrote was impossible and counterproductive, and therefore he went to Paul and said, I give up, I can't figure it out. Why don't you come up with a new plan?
And it would have to be that way for Paul to be true.
Right.
I mean,
how absurd that is, how stupid that is. And you got 2.4 billion people that believe that. And you go, what's wrong with you? Why are people talking about a Jesus when the name was invented in the 17th century?
Yeah.
Why are they talking about a Christ when it's based on the Greek word that's the basis of pharmacy that means to be drugged?
Be drugged. God.
What do they think he would
leave your brain at the door?
Do they think he was a Greek and therefore had a Greek name? How in the world do they think that they can ignore the totality of what they call the Sermon on the Mount, which is his first and longest public discussion, and where he said that the broad way leads to death, the popular way leads to death, and that if you attempt to negate any aspect of the Torah, prophets, or think that for a moment I came to annul them, it's just not true.
Well, our Christians know that about the narrow is the way and few find
Right.
it. Did they not know there's 2.5 billion of them?
Right. But how could you be in a situation where you say, well, I didn't come to annul the Torah, but to fulfill it, and they think, well, that means fulfill it means to do away with it and disassociate. I did not come to do away with it. And then you think that, well, fulfill it means to do away with it. Would he just lie? Did he have a senior moment and contradict himself? Is he as disingenuous and hypocritical as you are as a religious person? I mean, it's so obvious, and yet until somebody points it out to you, maybe it isn't so. It wasn't for me until somebody pointed it out to me.
Yeah. But once you know there's, I don't care if you throw the dirt under the carpet, but once you know, turn the light on, you know the dirt's there, or you throw it on, you know it's there.
Right.
You can never defend it again.
How many times did you hear Christians ponder what the thorn in Paul's side might have been?
Constantly.
And yet, Paul explains exactly what the thorn. He says exactly what the thorn in his side was.
Yeah, he tells you.
I'm demon possessed.
Possessed.
Right. I'm demon possessed.
How the hell how much room is in your soul for a demon and a set-apart spirit?
Zero.
That's quite a trick if you can pull off both of them. Well, it's the representation of him, and in fact, one of the little books I was reading recently, we'll talk about maybe sometime down the road, but it's the same thing, is they never address the fact that Yahowah's words don't compare in any shape.
Paul and Yahowah said exactly the opposite things.
Yeah.
They have nothing in common.
Nothing.
They're opposites.